Hello, this is Jan from Ancient Light Studios with a new tutorial on Scene Manager. Today we're gonna see how we can use Scene Manager with playMaker. I've prepared a new demo here, which is a very small demo, just the main menu and one level. And as you can see, we have a few buttons here: new game, resume game, reset progress, and there's a level. And in that level we can switch to the next level and return to the main menu. And this is basically what we're trying to do with Scene Manager and playMaker in this tutorial. So first you're going to need Scene Manager, of course, so let's open up the asset store and import it into our project. So since this is a tutorial on playMaker, we also need a copy of playMaker, which you can also get on the asset store. Just keep in mind, playMaker is not bundled with Scene Manager, so if you want to use it, you have to buy it from the asset store as a separate asset. So let's import that one. So now that we have imported playMaker and Scene Manager into our project, we first need to unpack the Scene Manager playMaker integration package. Out of the box, Scene Manager does not support playMaker, basically because if you don't have playMaker in your project, you would get compile errors, and that's why we have packed everything that integrates Scene Manager with playMaker into a separate package, which is called playMaker integration package. And you can find this in the root folder of your project, in the assets folder right here. And to import it, you just double click it and then press import, and now it will import everything that integrates Scene Manager with playMaker, basically all the actions that you need. Okay, as you can see, we have a few more folders here: Scene Manager playMaker and Scene Manager playMaker demo. Since we have our own demo project here, I will just delete the two demo folders so they don't get in the way of our demo. Okay, so let's open up the main menu and let's see how we can bring these buttons to life. The first thing that you need to do is create a scene configuration. This is the same no matter if you're using Scene Manager with scripting or if you're using it with playMaker. The first thing you need is a scene configuration. The scene configuration should be located in a folder below any resources folder of your project. So I've created a folder here that's called config, and I will just create a new scene configuration here by right clicking on it and selecting create scene configuration. And maybe let's give this a nicer name than SM scene configuration, so maybe let's call it my game. Now you can see in the inspector on the right hand side that we have two scenes in our project. First is the main menu and the other one is our level 1. Now we need to tell Scene Manager which scene is going to play which role in your later game. So the main menu is going to be a screen. Basically a screen is everything that is not a level. So the main menu is a screen. So we just click on screen and you can see it's getting a nice screen icon here. And also the main menu is going to be the thing that you see first when you start up our game. So let's click the first screen button here as well. And also we want to see the main menu after we have finished the last level of our game. So let's click the after last level button here as well. Now let's select the level 1 and mark it as a level. Marking it as a level gives it another nice icon and it will show up in the levels list down below. So now we have created a very simple scene configuration, and what we always should do when we change a scene configuration, go to assets and then press verify scene configurations. This will verify that all your scene configurations are correct, and it will also modify the build settings of Unity and put all the scenes into your build settings, as you can see here. So it has added the main menu and the level 1, and it also makes sure that the thing that has been marked as first screen is going to be added as the first scene in these build settings. So Unity will show this scene as the first scene when the game is starting up. Okay, now we have a scene configuration, and now we can make these buttons work. So let's start with the new game button. Basically the button I have here is just a Unity 2D sprite and it has a box collider, so we can click on it. So to attach any logic to a button, we need to first add a playMaker FSM. So let's put a playMaker FSM here, and then let's open the playMaker editor to edit this FSM. playMaker has created a state for us. It's called state 1. It's not a very good name. I would suggest that you always give your states good names, because it makes things a lot easier when you need to debug things or have a look at an FSM maybe a few days after you created it. And if everything is just labeled state 1, state 2, then that's not very helpful. So just choose a good name. Maybe let's call it idle, because this is the state that is going to be waiting for a button click. So the button starts in idle state, and then we click the button, and then it will switch the state and execute some logic that will load the first level. So let's create a new state and call that state start a new game. Start a new game. And we want to switch to that state once someone has clicked the button. So let's add a transition using system events, mouse up, which is basically a click, and then let's create a transition from idle to start a new game. Now we need to add an action that will actually start a new game, and we can do that by using the action browser. And we look for an action that's called load first level. This is Scene Manager's action for starting a new game. So just double click on it and it will be added to this state. So this is basically everything you have to do. Now let's start the game and let's check if this actually works. So now I click on the new game button, and oh, it's not working. Why is it not working? Well, it is not working because we haven't initialized Scene Manager. Why would we need to initialize Scene Manager? Well, we would need to do so because Scene Manager needs to know which scene configuration it should load. Basically, you can have a lot of scene configurations, and without initializing it, Scene Manager has no idea which of the scene configurations you want it to load. So, how do we initialize Scene Manager then? Well, let's create an empty game object for that and call this Initialize Scene Manager. And then let's open it up in the playMaker editor and create a new FSM here. And we call this state Initialize Scene Manager. Now let's open up the action browser and look for Initialize. As you can see, there's an Initialize Scene Manager action. Let's double click on it and it will be added to the state. And this action requires you to specify the folder where your scene configuration is located. So we have put our scene configuration in the config folder below the resources folder. So we just enter here config. Okay, let's try again. Now we have initialized Scene Manager, so the button should work, shouldn't it? So I click on the new game and there we go. It's loading our first level. That's very cool. Now one important thing is that you need to initialize Scene Manager in every scene of your game. This is because when Unity is switching scenes, it basically forgets everything that happened in the previous scene. So once we have switched the scene, Scene Manager is no longer initialized and you need to reinitialize it. Now this would mean that you would have to create the same empty game object in each of the scenes, and if you decide to put your configurations in some different folder later, then you would have to run over all the scenes and have to change it. That's why it's a good idea to make this a prefab that you can reuse in every scene of your project. So let's just drag this one into our prefabs folder here. So it's creating a new prefab from that. You can also see that it has gotten some bluish tint on it, so it's marked as a prefab. Okay, now that we can load the first level of our game, let's maybe switch to the level and make the things in the level work first before we continue with the main menu. So in our level 1 we have some question marks up here. We have a button which should bring us to the main menu, and we have a button which should load the next level. Okay, first let's do the return to the main menu button, because that's the easiest thing to do. As I just mentioned, you need to initialize Scene Manager in that level, so let's drag our prefab down here. And now we can select the main menu button, open it up in the playMaker editor, add an FSM to it, rename the first state to idle. So you see it's very similar to our start a new game button. The first state is idle, then we create another state and we call that go to main menu. And then we add a transition using the mouse down system event. So if someone clicks the button, it will go to this state, and then we can use an action called load screen. And you give it the name of the screen that you want to load. In our case, it's named main menu. Okay, let's try that out. And you can see it's returning to the main menu. That's very good. Okay, now since we only have one level, the next level button is not going to do very much. So I think we should add a few more levels. But before we do that, I want to show you how you can find out in which level you currently are. Maybe you need that for loading data from your files, or maybe for creating a save game, or maybe you just want to display it somewhere. I have prepared a GUI text here, which is the level thing here, which just has 3 question marks right now. And we want to display the name of the current level up here. So to do that, we just add another FSM to that. And there's an action that is called get current scene name. This is loading the current scene name into a variable. Now we don't have a variable right now, so let's create a new one. The scene name is going to be a string, so let's call it scene name and make it of type string. And then we can assign a value to this. And now we can use another action which is built into playMaker. This is called setProperty. And we need to make sure it runs after the get current scene name action. And now we can use this action to set this text value down right here to the name of the currently loaded scene. So let's drag this GUI text into the target object, change the property to text, and then select our variable. And this should set up our label, our level label. And also let's rename the state here, maybe to Initialize label. Okay, so now if we start the game, it should display level 1 as our level label and not the question marks. Okay, let's do that. And you can see it does not. Basically, we're getting another error message here, and it's telling us that Scene Manager is not initialized. Now, why is that? We initialized Scene Manager, we created a prefab and we loaded it in here, so Scene Manager should be initialized. So why are we getting this error message? The reason for that is that playMaker is executing these FSMs in parallel. So when we start the game and we start this this scene, then the FSM for Initialize Scene Manager and the FSM that's driving our label are executed in parallel. and this means that basically you can call an action in the label FSM while Scene Manager is not yet initialized. And we may need to make sure that we only call Scene Manager actions after Scene Manager has been initialized. So how do we do that? Well, we can do that by using events. playMaker has a very nice event system which allows you to send events to different FSMs, and these can react on these events. So let's edit our Initialize Scene Manager action. Just select it and then click on the Edit Prefab button. So we edit our prefab. And let's add a new event to that. And let's call this event Scene Manager Initialized. It's also important to make this a global event, because you can only send events between FSMs if the event is marked as global. Otherwise, this event is just for this one FSM. So you can send it between different states, but you cannot send it to another FSM. And we want it to be global, so let's tick this checkbox here. Now open up the state and add a new action. Let's call Send Event. We want to send this event to basically all FSMs in the project, because we don't know which FSM is going to react on that one. So use the broadcast all, and we can exclude our own FSM here because we don't need to react on that event. And we send the event Scene Manager Initialized. Now that we have done that, we can react on that event in our level FSM here. We do that by starting with an idle state. So we make this the start state, and then we add a transition on global event Scene Manager Initialized and transition it to the initialized label state. So what this will do is this FSM will wait until Scene Manager is initialized, then it gets the event, and then it will switch to the initialized label state and will start initializing the label. And this should work. So let's try it out. And there you can see we have level 1 up here. That's pretty cool. So the only thing missing for that level here is the next level button. So let's select that one, create another FSM on that, and again start with an idle state, create a new state, and we call this Load Next Level, and then we add a transition from mouse up to Load Next Level. How do we load on the next level? Basically we use the Load Next Level action of Scene Manager, and Scene Manager takes care of the rest. Scene Manager is having a look in our scene configuration, and it's deciding which is the next level, and it's going to load that one. So all you need to do is call Load Next Level, and Scene Manager will do the rest. Now let's try that out as well, and click on the Next Level button. And now we're back in the main menu. Why is that? Well, this is because we have set it up this way in our scene configuration. We said that we want to have the main menu as the screen that should be displayed after we have finished the last level. Since we only have one level, we will return to the main menu right after we have finished level 1. So maybe let's duplicate this a few times and modify our scene configuration so that we can use a few more levels and see how that is working. Let's go back to the main menu. Let's press New Game, and you see it's loading level 1. Now we switch to the next level, and you see this is level 2. Next level is level 3, next level is level 4, level 5, and then we should be returning to the main menu, which we do. The cool thing about Scene Manager is that you can reorder your levels without having to change anything in your project. So if I would decide that I wanted to have level 5 as my first level, and then I wanted level 4, and then I wanted level 3, so basically everything in reverse. So this would play all the levels in reverse. New game, and we start with level 5. And we haven't changed anything in our scenes. So this is really where Scene Manager is going to help you. So now the only thing that is missing is the resume button and the reset progress button. Basically these two buttons are tied to each other. The resume button should only be shown if the player is actually playing a game right now. So maybe he has started with level 1 and maybe he has also played level 2, and then he has returned to the main menu and exits the game, and later on he wants to come back and he wants to resume where he left off. And this is what this resume button is going to do. Now how do we do that? Well, first again, let's add an FSM to that. And again we start in idle state. And again we create a new state and we call that resume game. And we again add a transition on mouse up and move to resume game. And then we use the load next level action to load the next level, or basically return to the level where the player has left off. Don't be confused, there's another action that is called load last played level. This is deprecated. This has been used in earlier versions of Scene Manager. You still have it in here to avoid breaking older projects, which are still based on Scene Manager. But really use the load next level action. It's going to work exactly the same way. And this is the action that's going to stay while we will remove load last played level action at some point in the future. So just stay clear of that, use load next level and you should be fine. Okay, let's try that out. We press resume game. And you see we left off at level 3 and we came back to level 3. So maybe I go to the next level, which should be level 4. And then return to the main menu and press the resume game button again, and I will be back to level 4. So Scene Manager is keeping track of our level progress and is doing the resume for us, so we don't need to do anything for that. Now what would be really nice if this button would only be active if the player actually has played a game before. How would we do that? Well, there's another action in Scene Manager which can tell you whether or not the player has already played a game before, and you can use this action to decide on whether or not you want to show that button. So to implement this, we would need to hide that button by default and only show it if the player has played a game before. So what I will do is I will disable the sprite renderer and the box collider of this button, so the button is not shown and it's not clickable anymore. Now I go back to my FSM and I will have to do some modifying of that, because basically I will need to initialize the button. And to do that, I will first need to check if the player has played a game before. The action for this is called has played. And it's storing a Boolean value. This is basically a true-false value. So it's storing true if the player has played a game before, and it's storing false if the player has not played a game before. To store this somewhere, we of course need to create a variable. So let's create a new one and let's call it has played. And as I said, it's going to be of type bool. So we store that value in has played. And now we can use the set property action again to enable our sprite renderer and our box collider if the player has actually played a game and therefore we want to display the button. So let's use our set property. Add a second one of this because we need to enable two components. So let's drag in the sprite render here. We set the property named enabled, and we set it to the value of has played. So if the player has played, this is going to be enabled, and if the player has not played, then it's going to be disabled. And we repeat this for the box collider. Again, the property is named enabled, and we fetch that from our has played variable. So we need to change a bit of our eventing here. We start in idle, then we have to wait for scene manager to be initialized. Again, we cannot call any scene manager function before scene manager has been initialized. So we delete this transition here. Delete transition. And then we add a new transition and we call that scene manager initialize, and then we transition to initialize button. And from here we use the mouse up event to move to the resume game state, and this will load the next level. Okay, so just for you to remember, the button is disabled and it's not visible right now, and if I start the game it should become visible because we have actually a game running. So now I click on resume game, I will be switch to level 4, I go to next level, and I come back to the main menu. And now you can see the button is no longer be shown because Scene Manager automatically resets your level progress once you have finished the last level. And because you have finished the game, the only thing you can do right now is start a new game. That's why this button is off right now. Now, when you're developing a game, you might want to reset your level progress while you're developing it. And we have created an action for that as well. It's called reset progress. And we want to use this action here to reset the level progress when we click that button. So again, add an FSM. Basically, we can copy this from resume game. So let's just copy this FSM, go to reset, and paste everything. So it's asking me if I want to replace the start state. Yes, I want to do that. So there's that state 1 remaining here. We just delete that. Okay. And the only thing we need to do here is rename that one to reset level progress. And we of course need to change the action. So we remove the load next level action and we use the SM reset progress action, which will go to reset our level progress. And since we copied it, we also need to make sure that we reference the correct sprite renderer and box collider in our initialize button action. So you can see it's still referencing the ones in the resume game button, so we need to drag these over from our reset progress button. Okay, let's switch this off by default and let's start a game. You can see we're still in the state where we have finished the last level, no one has played, our level progress is already reset, and there's no resume button and there's no reset button. Let's start a new game and return to the main menu. And you can see now we have the resume button and the reset progress button. Let's click on that. Okay, it looks like nothing happened. Why is that? Well, maybe let's switch off and on again. It seems to have worked, but it didn't update our buttons. So we need to fix that as well. To fix this, we can use an event again. So let's return to our reset progress button, FSM. And then let's create a new event and call this level progress reset. Again, make sure it's a global event so we can send it to other FSMs. Now in our reset level progress state, we use the send event action to send this to all FSMs excluding ourselves, and we use the level progress reset event. And also, after we have finished this state, we should return to the initialize button state, so the button actually disappears because it has reset the level progress. So let's add a transition on finished and return to initialize button. Now in the resume game FSM, we need to react on this level progress reset event. So we add another transition, global event, level progress reset, and once we get that event, we will just restart this initialize button state, and this should update the button UI. Okay, let's start the game. Let's again start a new game, return to the main menu, reset our level progress, and you can see both buttons are disappearing. You might have noticed that Scene Manager is playing a transition when you switch between levels. And you might have asked how you can change this transition. Scene Manager is coming with a few transitions out of the box. So you can see here we have a blinds, we have cartoon, we have cinema, we have fade, and so on and so on and so on. You can set up the transition that Scene Manager should use in the Initialize Scene Manager action. So let's open up the Initialize Scene Manager prefab again. Click on Edit Prefab, and you can see here on the Initialize Scene Manager action there is a default transition entry. So maybe let's choose the newspaper transition. It's looking for any transitions below a resources folder, just as it looks for configurations below a resources folder. So you need to specify the whole path below the resources folder if you want to change the transition. So if I want to use the newspaper transition, then I have to use transitions SM newspaper transition, because this is located in transitions and then SM newspaper transition right here. Let's start it up. And you can see it's using the newspaper transition. You can configure all the transitions here by just clicking on them, and then you have an inspector where you can modify all the transitions. So that wraps up our tutorial on Scene Manager and playMaker. If you have questions, you can send us an email at support@ancientlightstudios.com. You can also have a look at our website at www.ancientlightstudios.com/Scene Manager to find more information about all the actions that are available for Scene Manager and playMaker. I hope this tutorial was useful. Please provide some feedback if you think we can improve this. Good luck with your project and have fun. Thank you.